seller dies, it's not your house, right?
Right. If the seller dies, then they have a mortgage, and the mortgage would go through their estate. So it would go to their heirs. And yeah, you don't get lucky. If the seller dies, then you don't have to pay the mortgage anymore. That would be unethical. That sounds like a plot of a, oh, you know what, this guy in, you know what, this was in the news. There was a lottery winner in Florida. I'll pause this for a second. Anyway, if you have a seller finance mortgage, it's a good idea to, you know, buy an alarm system. It was just blotted out of the video. People who missed class, they can wonder what I was talking about. Now, think about this from a company's point of view. Companies have the same decisions to make. Companies can decide, should I take out debt or should I sell ownership shares? And debt carries this risk, because if you miss a payment on your debt, your debt holders could push you into bankruptcy. They could literally close your company. So if you have too much debt, you constantly have this danger hanging over you as a stockholder. On the other hand, if you issue stock, then that risk is gone because you don't have to pay dividends. So if you don't have enough cash flow to make interest payments, you can issue more stock, and when you do have cash flow, you pay your dividends. If you don't have cash flow, don't pay dividends, and that's it, and you don't have to worry about that risk. But there's a good thing here that you could do with debt, and that is that if you could borrow money at a lower rate than you invested, then you can literally make money when borrowing. And it's the same thing it's a similar situation to what we did right here. And it works like this. Let's say that you borrow, $300,000 and you invest it in your assets, all of it. And the assets give you a return of 15% a year. Okay, 300,000 times 15%, that's $45,000 a year return. And the interest on this debt is only 10%. So that would be annual interest of $30,000. So if you can borrow money, 300,000, and invest it in assets that will return 15% a year, that's going to give you annual profit, increase your profits by 45,000. And your interest on that money was only 30,000, then you're making money. So it's in your best interest to borrow money in a scenario like this. If you can borrow money and the interest rate is lower than the return on assets, you're going to make money. The only danger here is that if you miss a payment, then you're in trouble. So your assets had better be well invested. So it's the same kind of situation as before. You take out a mortgage, the value goes up higher than the interest on the mortgage. The house goes up by 50,000 in value. You only had so and so much interest on the mortgage. The 50,000 easily covers all of that. In this case, we had, I guess, I'm not even sure what the number was. But the interest, the appreciation in value covers the interest on the mortgage easily, and the rest of the money is yours. So what companies can do that borrow a lot of money is they can literally use that borrowing to earn profit. The alternative to this, issuing more stock again, is almost risk-free. Because if you're going to issue more stock, then you don't have to make any payments. But you've now diluted your ownership shares. And whereas before you owned 100% of the company, now maybe you own 50% or less of the company. Now take a look here at two companies. We have here General Mills and Google. You know Google, what does General Mills do? Yeah, they make cereal. First of all, I'm just going to do this for you. Assets equals liabilities plus stockholders' equity. So stockholders' equity for Google would be 72,574 minus 14,429, or 58,145. And for General Mills, assets would be liabilities plus stockholders' equity. So it'd be 12,309 plus 6,366 is 18,675. Gesundheit. Now figure out the debt ratio. Debt ratio again is liabilities divided by assets. Yes.
For the exam, do we have to memorize all the equations, or are they just...
I'm afraid that you're gonna have to know the equations.
Isn't that the equation in the back?
What?
Isn't that the equation we're given in the back?
Depreciation?
Not the equations.
No, they won't. We didn't do them in the spring, and I don't think we'll be doing them in the summer either. Sorry. But you shouldn't, debt ratio, liability, we'll go over them. I'll show you some shortcuts to remember them. We had a big meeting about this, and we decided that students should know the ratios. So I'll show you some shortcuts to remembering them. It shouldn't be a big deal. Okay. Compute the values for B and Y. That's what we just did. Ratio quantifies the portion of assets. Which one is financing assets primarily with debt? Google or GIS? General Mills. Therefore, General Mills has the greater financial risk. Which company, based on this only, which company do you think would be a better investment? Google. Why? It has less financial risk. That's very interesting. The reason why, which company though do you think is really the riskier investment? Google or General Mills? Which one is the riskier investment? Forget about debt ratio for a second. In general, which one is riskier, Google or General Mills? Google, why? The stock price is very high. Why else? Competition. How does Google make money? Advertising on the internet. How old is Google's business model? How old and proven is Google's business model? Less than 20 years? Google's business model is not a proven business model, right? Like advertising on the internet is something new that companies have been making money over for the last 5 or 10 years or so. It's just an article in the Wall Street Journal yesterday or maybe Saturday about how there's a lot of internet advertising fraud. It's a new business model. How old is General Mills' business model? It's older than any of us, right? People buy cereal and eat it for breakfast. Right? So when you think about which business is a safer business, breakfast cereal, internet advertising. Breakfast cereal is a much safer business model than internet advertising, as odd as it sounds. All right? If I told you 20 years ago, Microsoft has a fairly new business model, you would have laughed at me and say they dominate the whole market. It doesn't matter. Because 10 years from now, Microsoft could go away. And everyone's like, no, no, no. Of course it could. Same thing with Apple and iPhones. Say what you want about the iPhone, right? but it's not a proven business model yet. It's a new business model. So here's what's going on. General Mills can take on a lot of debt because its business model is very safe. Google can't take on a lot of debt because it's in a new risky business model that's not completely proven yet. It's in a highly competitive environment. It's making a lot of money, but still there's a tremendous amount of risk there. So that's why General Mills can have debt. It can afford financial risk because its business is so safe. Believe me, people will be buying Cheerios for the next 20 years and eating them for breakfast. Okay, take a second right now and fill out question 2. It does, but it does not have to pay dividends to shareholders. The corporation, does it have to repay amounts borrowed from creditors? Must or never has to? Must repay the creditors. And does it need to repay amounts invested by shareholders? Never has to pay that back either. So you can see here, debt is very risky. The interest expense of debt, I didn't even go into this, reduces taxable income. It's tax deductible. Dividends paid is not tax deductible. You'll see this in finance class. And issuing additional debt, does that dilute current shareholders' ownership? No, it does not. Issuing additional common shares of common stock, does that dilute current shareholders' ownership? Yeah, so you can see that's a con of shareholders' ownership. If you were CFO, how should you finance assets? With debt or equity? With equity, why? Equity is safer. Oops. I don't know what I just did here. But you know what? Debt has a lot to say for itself. If you have a very safe business, like remember this whole thing with making money, other people's money. This whole thing with the idea that you can buy this house and make all this money on flipping houses. That entails, what's the biggest assumption that you're making there? That the value of the house is going to go up, right? That's really the biggest assumption. That assumption is true most of the time. So if you can say, I'm absolutely certain, or I'm almost 99.9% certain that the value of this house will appreciate, then you're in good shape. You will make money on this deal. But if you're not sure, then there's a chance that it could come back. So if you're in a business where you know you're going to make money, like you make breakfast cereal, then debt makes a lot of sense. Here, look back at, oh, wait a minute. Look back at Walmart. I don't have the numbers on this one. Walmart had a decent amount of debt, remember? Here it is. There you go. Walmart had more debt than Tiffany. Walmart has 62%. So it's how can Walmart handle so much debt? Has a good business model, sell lots of stuff. That's a solid business model. So it can, and there's another reason why, which I won't get into. It has like a weird, Walmart has very strange financing. But Ford Motor Company, how can Ford Motor Company handle so much debt? Because it came from no, government did not bail out Ford Motor Company. They bailed out GM and Chrysler. They did not bail out Ford. Anyone know? How can Ford handle so much debt? Yeah.
People are always gonna buy cars.
People are always going to buy cars and Fords. People will always buy Fords. Maybe they can't handle that much debt. Yeah, David?
Because they make so much more product in which people would need cars. And since they make a lot of it, they can make it very cheaper.
Let me suggest something a little different. The company might have too much debt, right? It may be too much debt for Ford. Does Ford have a successful business model? No. So Ford may be the example of what happens if you have too much debt. They're in trouble. Now, Ford has sort of turned, what Ford did here was they sold off various divisions to pay off some of the debt and try to even out their cash flow. But Ford has really struggled over the last few years. Next.